Hey everyone, I am super excited to be here with Elsa and Molly, who are both here with Croso. And Croso has been a client of mine for the last few months, and we've been wrapping up a project together, and they have just done such a tremendous job. And I'm excited to celebrate all of their wins with you all. So we wanted to invite you all into the conversation and give you a little sneak peek about what they've been up to. So welcome, Elsa and Molly.
Thanks so much.
Yay.
Thank you.
And tell us a little bit, Molly. I know that you founded Croso, but I know that you're a fairly small organization, so a lot of people may not know who Croso is and what you all do. So would you mind just like giving us a little overview so everyone who might be joining us has that context?
Sure, absolutely. So CROSO is an acronym. It stands for Child Restoration Outreach Support Organization. We are a tiny nonprofit. We only have one staff member. That's me. And we have been around since 2007, so 15 years. And we have an amazing group of volunteers that participate in our work. Our work is providing college scholarships to former street kids in Uganda. So all of our scholars they study in Uganda, and they're all attending post-secondary school, so college, university, or technical school, and we are based in Chicago. So Elsa is our board chair right now and the leader of our board. So Elsa, I don't know if you want to share a little bit about your history with Croso by way of introduction.
Sure, I'll do that. So, hi, I'm Elsa. I am our current board president, which I've been serving in for almost a year now. I was just doing the math today. This is my ninth year being involved with Croso and sixth year on the board of directors. So, during my long tenure with Croso, I have sat on various committees, been involved in various projects, but the through line of my work with Croso has been really connected to the scholars, the scholar support, various scholar issues, applications, and that is part of what keeps me energized and excited in this work is getting to know our scholars, all the struggles and the triumphs that they face in their day-to-day and year-to-year, and then getting to see what they do in their communities as graduates.
I love it. And Molly, I know that I had shared that you were the founder. You gave a little bit of history, and then you said you're the only staff person. But just for a little, even more context, Molly's role is as executive director, right?
Correct.
So tell us a little bit. I know that not everyone is going to be familiar with nonprofit structure, and especially like the structure of how your organization works with just one staff person and a board. So part of the reason I asked both Molly and Elsa to be here is because they play integral roles in the success and the functioning of Croso. So can you just like help us understand how that all works with the structure of the board?
Sure. So as the staff person, I'm the one who does the day-to-day tasks. So because I'm the only staff person, I do all the tasks, whether that's scholar support or fundraising or the paperwork side of things. That all falls under my responsibilities. The board is really charged with setting strategic vision, of having sort of the financial health of the organization in mind, and because it's a working board, and not all nonprofit boards are working boards, but ours is, all of our board members are also really active in committees. So all of our board members are required to serve on at least one committee. And our committees range from, as Elsa was mentioning earlier, the Scholar Support Committee. We also have a Career and Professional Development Committee, which focuses on our scholars and helping support them in their path towards careers after graduation. We also have a finance committee, a development committee that focuses on fundraising, and then we have our Ugandan advisory committee and our annual benefit committee, so an event planning committee. So that's sort of the breakdown of the two. So I report to the board of directors. that's sort of the hierarchy there, is that they are above me, but as our staff person, I am the one who is operationalizing the plans that they create.
Absolutely.
Elsa,
Thank
anything
you.
to add to that?
No, I think that was a great overview. I do also want to add that we have a strong internship program and partnership, and so I think we would be remiss to not include the value that our interns bring, and that is one more thing that Molly does for us, which is stewarding our interns and helping them put out great work too.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, thanks for adding that in, Elsa. I always love when organizations have strong internships because it's helping generate that new energy in the organization and creating that training space. And it is a lot to, like as you said, Elsa, like steward interns and especially doing it well. And one of the things I've really admired about working with Croso, and I've shared this with Molly behind the scenes like several times, but like it has been such a delight to work with Croso. Like I just get giddy about the work that they do and how many things that they do so well that I feel honored and privileged that I got to come alongside of them. And I know that Molly, you were sharing part of the role of the board is sort of the strategic planning and decision making about the direction of the organization. And I know that that's part of where the work that I came in to do intersects with what the board does. And so even though you and I were the ones who originally connected, I had the privilege of working with the whole team. So tell me a little bit about like, what was life like before connecting with me? Like how did strategic planning look? How did that all work in the world prior to you and I connecting?
So it has looked different over the years because we have grown. Even though we're still a very small organization, we have grown from being an even smaller organization. But most recently, it involved the executive committee. So the board president, board vice president, and the treasurer and myself collaborating ahead of we have an annual board retreat where we take typically like one full day where we really say like, let's take a moment and step back, look at the bigger picture, reevaluate, how we're doing, where we're going, what we're doing. And so that's usually the time when we're thinking strategically. That's our time that we've kind of created for that. But it was always the executive committee that was creating that plan. And then we were the ones leading and facilitating how that plan was sort of engaging the rest of the board. So prior to working with you, Cassandra, we were the ones creating the plan, implementing the plan, and then needing to follow through on the plan. Yeah. Can I talk about what happened now?
Well, yeah, and I was gonna say, can you help connect the dots too about like how did we connect and what was that journey like to go from how we originally met to us working together more in a more robust way?
Absolutely. So I found out about Cassandra through someone else's Facebook post. So Cassandra offered a free coaching workshop at one point that was working on goal setting, and that fit really well in line with some things that I was hoping to do, sort of both professionally and personally. And so I participated in that, and it was a couple day session, and I really enjoyed participating in that and saw a lot of value in it. And at the end of it, Cassandra and I had a little one-on-one chat and talked about the sort of broad services that you offer in addition to just the coaching. And one of the things you said, as we had talked about the nonprofit work that Croso is doing, you said that you work with boards and sometimes will help facilitate that. And I was like, oh, that's the spot. That's where we could connect for future, future collaboration. And we were really in a place, I'll be honest, we hadn't budgeted to have anyone come in to help facilitate our strategic planning session or our annual retreat. And once I started talking with you, I was like, this is absolutely what we should be doing. We have some big conversations we need to be having. It's going to be really helpful to have an outside facilitator. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. Once we actually started talking to each other and created our larger plan, there were so many additional value adds, but that's where it really started, was just recognizing the benefit of having an outside facilitator for some of that.
I love that. And I know that one of the first people I think that you talked to, if I'm remembering correctly, about the possibility of bringing me in to be a part of that was Elsa, because of her role as the board president. So how did that conversation go? Talk to me a little bit about that, like decision-making process, and what was being talked about and weighed in and considered as you were thinking about going through your annual retreat and strategic planning differently than you had before.
Yeah, I'll kick us off, Molly. I think as we were thinking towards the end of last year about what our annual retreat would look like, we always have a balance of, there's operational things we want to talk about, there's strategic things that we want and need to talk about. There were goals that we had in 2021 that we didn't achieve, and thinking about, okay, how do we carry these goals forward into 22? What do we need to bring into the conversation or readjust from the conversation? And we also looped in the executive committee, who asked some really good questions, and brought other things to light that we should be thinking about. And I think it became clear to us and are like, okay, what's our agenda going to be? That we needed some neutral party to help facilitate these conversations, especially as we think back on some of our past board retreats, where we have this wonderful problem of, like, our entire board is full of like thoughtful and super engaged people. And so, who also give respect to each other and listen to each other's opinions. So conversations can derail. And, having missed a couple big goals in 21, we were like, okay, we need to see these through, and we cannot derail ourselves one more time. We need to be more strategic, more purposeful, and recognizing internally that there's no one on the board who was like the person to do that for us. And so kind of in order to take us and our organization towards the next level, we needed some kind of outside input and guidance and assist and like push.
And before I'll pass it to you too, Molly, if there's anything that you want to add to that. But before I do, I think that like what I was hearing there, Elsa, was a couple of the pieces that motivated this was that you had big goals going into this year that you already knew you wanted to accomplish, big important conversations. And that was coupled with recognizing that in 2021, you didn't quite make it to the goals that you had set. And so those two things, coupled with knowing that because you have such a loving and supportive board, that sometimes, and I think that the ways I've heard you all talk about it before is like sort of spinning your wheels a bit, or really kind of getting in that like analysis paralysis, where because you are wanting to be so thoughtful and careful, it was getting too much in the weeds, which meant that you weren't able to push things forward. Am I remembering and summarizing that pretty well?
Oh, definitely.
Okay, great. And then I have a couple of follow-up questions to that, Molly, but before I jump into that, Molly, was there anything that you wanted to add around any of that?
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I got distracted. I totally agree with what you had just said. So I was really in it with you right there. I was just going to add, Elsa mentioned when we brought this sort of conversation about what we wanted this annual retreat to look like to the executive committee, that they helped us really hone in on some of the areas we needed to focus on. And I think that is when we recognized that it needed to be focused really on our long-term plan, like a 5-year plan and then 1-year plan goals, rather than just some of the bigger operational questions that we had, recognizing that actually having a clear vision for where we're going would make some of those smaller, very important, but smaller operational issues easier to address. So yeah, that was all I wanted to add. We're doing great.
Love it. Love it. Well, and I think that what that reminds me of, or part of the journey that we went on together too, is recognizing that when I got into chatting with everyone on the board, having my one-on-ones before going into our retreat together, one of the things I admired about you all is that operationally, your day-to-day is actually very smooth and you don't have a lot of the same challenges, I think, that some organizations who, how do I say, like, there's just, you got a lot of things working well, and so to keep doing what you're doing, you wouldn't necessarily need to change anything. But because you had visions of big growth, big change, that is why this was such a big shift, right? Because operationally, if you wanted to just keep doing what you're doing and not having growth or the change, then you're pretty well set up. But it was really about those pieces that were wanting to shift. So can we dig in and kind of pull the curtain back on, like, what were those things that you knew you wanted to change and that were going to be those harder, bigger conversations that people were, you were wanting to prep people for and felt like you were needing that support around?
Yeah. So I think the biggest piece that we have, and to be honest, like, the pandemic really caused us to spin our wheels on some of this more than anything else. But I think it was like February of 2020. So like the month before the World Health Organization recognized the worldwide pandemic, we as a board were like, all right, we're ready to hire someone in Uganda. And then everything changed. And it was like, well, we didn't do that, even though that had been what we fully stated and agreed to as a board. And so, as Elsa was saying, we were coming to the end of 2021 and we still hadn't hired someone in Uganda. And we're feeling like, wow, we're really not making progress on that area of growth. And a big reason that we want to hire someone in Uganda is that we fully recognize that the decisions that we're making are in the context of Uganda. And so having Ugandan voices in our decision making is critical to making good decisions and to making decisions that are in the best interest of our scholars. And we have found some ways to include more Ugandan voices through our Ugandan Advisory Committee, but we're ready to have substantial leadership that's based in Uganda. And so really making that a clearer priority was, I think, the biggest thing that we brought into this conversation. One thing that was really interesting, I thought, when we were having some of our prep conversations, so you mentioned that you had one-on-one conversations with all of the board members, but in addition to that, we had a prep conversation with the executive committee. And even within that conversation, it became clear that there was some dancing around of what does it mean to be shifting operations to Uganda? And more specifically, like, how does that affect our current staff person, me? And it was really interesting to have the conversation because for me, I didn't recognize that there had been such dancing around because I knew personally that I was very much in favor of us moving our operations to Uganda, and that if that meant changing my role, that was okay. That's in line with where we want the organization to be going. But other people didn't know that. I didn't know they didn't know that. So anyway, some of the value of working with you was just putting some of these conversations out there in a space where we could acknowledge some of those truths and then bring that to the larger board and really talk about it in more clear and sort of open communication.
Molly, and if I can add to that, for background for those listening in, we have kind of a classic, like, our founder is our employee kind of situation. And because we are small and because that is the situation, and because, you can all see that Molly's like a very pleasant person to talk to and hang out with, our organization has been, connected to Molly's network for a while. She and I met through a personal friend, which is fine. But really, over the past few years, we're getting to this point where, our Molly is not necessarily the glue that holds the wider network together. Yes. So props to that, because that means that we're growing in an organic and a fun and a different, more sustaining way than just being, one person. But there was still that cultural what if, I think, in the back of our minds. And I'll support that because it was in the back of my mind too. But just being able to have the safe space that Cassandra, you gave us to say, like, can I say this in front of Molly? At which point Molly was like, yeah, this is what I've been waiting for. This is what I want to. It was like, oh, okay. So now when all the other things start tumbling out, we have that safe space established. We have that common ground established. And, that's one scary thing that was like checked off the list, and it went well. So now we can say other scary things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that leads me into the next thing I wanted to kind of like unpack further, which was like, what was like sort of the emotional state, or what was going on for both of you prior to going into this kind of conversation, knowing that the goals were not being met, and you had big ambitions, but like there was maybe some disconnect between where you wanted to be and what was going on. So what was going on emotionally for both of you in Croso, or you're related to your work to Croso?
So, I mean, I'm board president. I'm kind of an emotive person. So I was taking all of this very personally. And also, I come from a for-profit world. So this is my first foray into a board experience, my first foray into a board presidency, and just listening and thinking, I feel in my gut that this is good, but what if it isn't? Like, what if I accidentally set us on this path, or, open some can of worms that is not good? And what if, these conversations kind of go off the rails? So that all sounds a little bit overly dramatic, but there was genuine concern of what if these conversations start and then turn south or go in a wrong way, and how personally responsible am I, or do I feel, for setting us on this path?
Sure. So it sounds like feeling like you were not only like logistically and practically responsible, but there was some like emotional responsibility to the whole group too, that you were kind of at the helm of. Did I catch that right?
Yeah. And to jump ahead just a little bit, there were a couple moments in our, in the actual retreat where, that were a little bit emotional, or, where we did catch a couple people off guard. And, that is part of the process, right? So not.
What about you, Molly? What was going on for you emotionally, like leading up to probably even just in the last, like obviously it sounds like this desire for change, this desire for your role to maybe have a dramatic shift, as well as just the reasons behind wanting to shift to Uganda operations has been bubbling under the surface for a while, right? And so what was going on for you just from like day to day and practically on an emotional level, running this organization, having this desire for change, but not quite being able to get there?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the phrase like spinning our wheels earlier. That was absolutely where I felt. I was like, and maybe spinning the wheels isn't the right, maybe it's more like treading water. Like we were doing the same thing, we were still doing fine, but like we weren't making any progress. And as someone who, I mean, I'm the founder, so I've been with this organization for 15 years. I have seen significant growth over the years, but in the last 2 years, we really initially we were in sort of crisis mode of like, how do we operate within the pandemic and the differences that changed for our logistics and operations. But then we kind of hit a point where we're like, okay, we figured that out. There were some tricky snags there, but we got through those. And now we're just not making progress, and we're just doing things the same way, even though we know what we want to do and we know why we want to do it. And so now it feels like we're just doing the wrong thing because we know the right thing is over here and we're not moving towards it. So that didn't feel great, to be honest. It felt like, it felt more like a slog to be like doing this day in and day out. So I was optimistic about our retreat conversation because I felt like, if nothing else, it at least pushes these topics to like top of mind for everyone. Because I think as the only employee, it's obviously top of mind for me, right? I'm the one that's doing this day in and day out. Other folks, they have their own lives. They're doing other work during the day. They're with their families. They're, all of that. And for some people, as we've said, we have a really invested group of board of directors, but these topics might not be top of mind until like we're having the conversations as a board. And so we were meeting as a board quarterly, which gives a long time in between to not have that be top of mind. So I was excited for the conversation to happen. I definitely had some anxiety about how it was going to be received. And part of me was like, well, we've been talking about it for a long time in little ways. So it felt like for the most part, it was going to be well received. I can jump ahead to the end and just say that I felt like really invigorated afterwards and was like, I found like a whole new enthusiasm for my job afterwards, because all of a sudden it was like, we're doing the things we've been saying we should be doing. This is so exciting. So like, sorry to cut to the ending there, but
it's okay.
Talking about emotions and how we felt around things, felt like it was important to show the whole scope.
Yeah, I love that. And what do you think was really the barrier that kept you from, you had these goals, you wanted to hire a Ugandan employee, and yet you're getting close to the end of 2021. And obviously I know the pandemic played a part in that, but I do think that there was more to it. There was some more complexity. So what was getting in the way of what you wanted to do? What do you think was holding you back from getting those things done?
So I could go into like logistics that we were facing, but I don't think that's at the heart of what you're asking. I think there were sort of two things. One, because we have been operating with only one employee for the past 6 years, 5 years, something like that. We just don't have a system in place for like how it looks to add another employee. And so, we're a small, very collaborative organization and have relied really heavily on the importance of input from members of our board of directors. And I think sometimes I allowed for that to get into like a negative space of needing more feedback or approval from the group before moving decisions forward, or feeling like I didn't have the approval to take decisions to the next level. And so I think that was one piece. And then, the logistics of how to do it was confusing. And, we presented things at different board meetings, and then the question would be like, okay, but we have more questions about like, what are the implications of this? And what are the options? And if we don't do it this way you're proposing, how else could we do it? And it was like, oh, I don't know, because this is the way I'm proposing. So it was, I think we were getting too in the weeds of it as at the board level, and needing to say, let's step back, set the direction, and then give Molly the ability to say, okay, that's our direction. Now I need to figure out the details of how we get there.
Got it. So it sounds like there wasn't necessarily a clear direction ahead of time. And so people were getting caught up in having a lot of questions about the big picture. And because I think that there was some of the general decision making, like this is something we want to do, but because, again, I think that one of the things I admire about you all is that you want to do things well. And so there was a lot of like wanting to make sure the right decision was made, right? And so there was a fear of the wrong decision so much that you were getting stuck. Does that feel accurate? Yeah. Elsa, did you have anything else you wanted to add to that?
I think I'll just add that, and Molly mentioned it earlier, but our quarterly board meetings and the cadence of communication just consistently being stretched out enough that it becomes easy to forget the details. And so in our board meetings or any other, meeting forums, there's always that period of like, let's catch up, let's remind ourselves from last time. I read the meeting notes, but I can't interpret them. And that, doesn't help.
Yeah. Well, and I think that is one of the things that when I came in to work with Molly, and even though I met with each of the board members individually as we were prepping to go into the retreat, I met with Molly more often for that prep as well. And recognizing that one of the early suggestions I had is I said to be able to move things forward in the way that I imagine and I see that you all want to do is having a more quicker, not quicker. What's the word I want? More often, meeting more often. The cadence is more often. I think that was one of the decisions that you all ended up adopting, is realizing that at least the executive board, in order to move things forward, there needed to have less of that gap, a more frequent cadence, so that those goals could be met. I'm curious too, like what other like solutions or support, if any, did you all explore in order to move your goals forward before deciding to bring in an outside facilitator to help support that?
We looked at, I think that we explored a couple outside facilitators, but because you and I had already had a connection, I felt really comfortable moving forward with you. And so I think we once we decided we were going to have an outside facilitator, we got a couple of quotes, but it was really, I think we knew by the time you and I connected, we knew this was the direction we wanted to be going. And so then it was a matter of what that would look like. And that's where you and I kind of went back and forth a couple times to talk about like, this component would be included, or we don't really need that, or how does this fit with how you've worked with other people, and like adapting that model so that it fit for Croso, which I think just as other people are listening to this and thinking about whether this is something that their company or organization might benefit from, I found that to be really helpful, that you were willing to cater your offerings and services to what our needs were, rather than just being like, this is what I offer to anyone and it doesn't change, it's just this package. It was really helpful that it was like, we can make it specific to what would actually work for you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it's important to in my role, recognize what I believe is best practices to come in and facilitate these kinds of conversations and these kinds of decision making, being able to bring groups together to help that that growth and that communication happen, but also recognizing, like you just said, every organization is going to have its own dynamics, its own needs, its own personality. And luckily, because of my like varied background with different types of organizations, as well as my own experience professionally that I can pull into in the different industries I've worked in, that ends up allowing for me to be able to be more adaptable, because I know the different ways that things have to flex. But B, then I also get to contribute that knowledge in, where like sometimes I think that when I come into organizations, there's a bit of this is the way it's always done, not even when it's like intentionally that energy, but just because that's the lens we're always looking through, we don't realize. And what I like to be able to do is marry both fresh approaches and ways of coming at this kind of work with also like what are the individual needs of the organization. And it delights me to like match that up. So I'm excited that was something that worked well for you too. And then I'm just wondering too. So it sounds like, and I think I either forgot or missed the point that you all were already looking for. You already knew that you wanted to have outside support. That decision was made, and was something that you were considering. It wasn't that you met me and then was like, oh, having an outside facilitator is something we want to do. It was sort of the other way around. It was something that you were already out looking for. You already knew what solution you wanted and you were just trying to find the right person. Am I understanding that right?
Well, I think yes and no.
Okay.
I think you and I met, and at that same time, the executive committee, or Elsa and I, were starting to talk about the annual retreat, and then we brought in the executive committee. And one of the first things that was decided by the executive committee was that we wanted this, we recognize the value of an outside facilitator. And I think you and I literally had our like one-on-one conversation, like maybe the week before. And so I was like, well, as it turns out, I have a candidate for us.
I love it. Well, then what were some of the pieces that when you were having that executive meeting, and maybe I'll throw it to Elsa first, that made you go, wow, this is something that we need some outside support? What kind of was the catalyst of that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think back now, and I think for me it was the kind of questions that we wanted to discuss, and the fact that Molly and I came into planning for our retreat saying, okay, we have these strategic pieces of operations that we need to really hammer out with the board. And our executive committee said, that's nice, but after these are done, what does next year look like? What does 2023 look like? Like what happens next? And we couldn't answer that with any level of fidelity or confidence. And so that snowballed into, we are at a place in the organization, in the board makeup, in what we're trying to do, in where we're at coming out of the pandemic, where we need to be having those conversations and be making those decisions. And, I will speak for myself and not Molly, say I knew I was not equipped to facilitate such a big conversation. And yeah.
So like the scope of the conversation or the weight of the conversation felt beyond what you were feeling empowered and equipped to lead. Am I understanding that right?
Yeah. And definitely taking into account how we have had, mixed results from previous board retreats where we went big and strategic and got sidetracked and have been spinning our wheels on the big strategic things too. So knowing the history of how big thorny conversations like these have gone in the past when we when we are all self-regulating, like we're not self-regulating, that's the problem. So
got it. So you weren't able to get through the conversations that you needed to have because of how you would get sidetracked.
Yeah. Not in a meaningful way to get us to an opinion or a goal or a coherent thought that we all agree on and move forward with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Molly, it looked like you had something else.
Yeah, I was thinking about one of the things that I found most valuable about your involvement with Croso's strategic planning conversations and some of the prep work was that it felt like we all were able to fully participate in it, which is something that we couldn't do when we were the ones facilitating it, because as the question asker, it's important to let other people answer the question. But all of us have really important perspectives that we needed to be able to contribute to this conversation, especially thinking about, the 5-year vision. That's a conversation that a staff member needs to be able to say, like, this is really like, I have the day-to-day on the ground experience. I think we should be going in this direction, but I need to say that without also then being like, does everyone agree? What are your thoughts? Like, it just put, the dynamic was such that it made, it didn't allow for people to like fully bring themselves, all of us, to the conversation, and having an outside facilitator really did make that different. And one other piece that feels related to this, so I'm jumping it in here, even though maybe it belongs somewhere else in our conversation, is that I really appreciated in the prep pieces that you engaged not only one-on-one with our board members, but also with all of our committee members. Getting that feedback from committee members that aren't board members was really important, again, for like bringing all of the perspectives and all of the insights into that conversation in a way that didn't slow us down, but rather like added momentum to the direction we were going. And I think when you proposed that, I was like so excited because I hadn't anticipated that. And then to see it, how it actually played out, was that not only were their voices included, but it meant that there was some buy-in from those committee members who felt appreciated and felt included in that process. So when we came back to the committees to say, okay, this is the direction we're going, no one was caught in like a totally off guard place. They were like, okay, that makes sense. And like, here's where my input was included, and now we can move forward. So that was really valuable for us.
Amazing. I love that. And that is one of the things that I care deeply about when I'm coming into any organization, is making sure that everybody's voice is heard. Whether in your case, it's, your organization is made up of your board members and your committee members, or I'm coming into a more traditional like business or enterprise where it's staff or employees, but recognizing that everybody is contributing to the mission and vision and direction of the organization. And that's going to happen whether by design or by default. So we want to make sure that we're doing it by design, and that people are going to be more engaged and, like you said, feel more included. And frankly, we're all better for it when we have all of that contribution. But I think that one of the things that that we had to make sure it happened at the same time is that we still moved forward, right? Because I know that like one of the pieces that you said before was, oh, because we care about getting everybody's ideas, sometimes we get stuck. So really recognizing that is a yes and, not an either or, and finding the right ways to use that strategy to get people's voices and input. And one of the things I loved doing that I think particularly worked well for you all was for me to facilitate communicating asynchronously with all of the committee members, gathering all of their ideas, their feedback, sharing that with all of the board, so that the board got to act as representatives of like constituents, so to speak, right? So they weren't just there with their own ideas and opinions, but were able to say, my committee, and speak with like confidence. They knew what their committee was saying and feeling, this because they had been directly asked. And then what I got really excited about was the back and forth flow that we were able to create for you all, where then we had our day one retreat, and then we're able to summarize all of that, bring those ideas and say, this is draft one of the direction that we're going, but it is still early enough that you are still an active contributor. And tell me a little bit, obviously I was a little more out of the details of your committee members meeting together and or communicating in between our 2 days of our retreat. But I did help facilitate that. But tell me a little bit more from both of your perspectives, because I know that you're both involved in the committees. What was that like in that in-between stage where part of the work had been done and they were getting to contribute again to the conversation?
Elsa, why don't you start on that one?
Yeah, because I think the Scholar Support Committee met in between. I think I'll echo what you said earlier, Cassandra, about good to feel included and great to take a temperature check on, is this right? Is this what you are feeling? Because we will be asking you to execute. eventually. And so setting up the communication, the expectation, the permission to push back, I think was good.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. So just to clarify for folks who are like totally new to this concept, we did one day of like 4 or 5 hours together, and then we came back. We had a plan that we were coming back like 10 days later or 2 weeks later and had like a 2 hour meeting. And in between that time, we were trying to get feedback from the committees. So some of our committees had a regularly scheduled meeting in between those 2 dates. And so the Scholar Support Committee was one of them. Our Ugandan Advisory Committee was another one. And both of those committees had really good conversations, raised important questions, which I think is where we really were able to dig a little deeper and say like, oh, this is a potential sticking point, or like, oh, this part didn't necessarily feel right. We were able to actually, we had a draft of, I think we had 9 annual goals that we had kind of come up with. And the Ugandan Advisory Committee's feedback really helped us say like, this goal shouldn't be for this year. Like that should be a later goal. And that was super helpful to get that feedback. And then our other committees that didn't meet in between were able to participate by email. And that, you know, if I were to do it again, I probably would be more intentional about scheduling actual meetings for all the committees so that there could be that more thoughtful engagement. But one of our committees in particular, the Career and Professional Development Committee, really engaged substantially via email. And we got some really interesting feedback from them that I think was great because they were seeing the whole plan, not just the pieces that applied to their committee. I thought we got some really great feedback that would actually end up applying to other pieces of the goals, you know, based on their own insights or their own experiences with their little piece of the pie. They were able to say like, oh, you know what would be really great is if that meant this for this other piece. So like, I thought that went really well. And overall, we heard like overwhelmingly positive feedback on where we were at that point in the planning process and the direction we were going. People were really excited. There was some trepidation of like, so what does this mean for us? Like how, if we're moving decision-making to Uganda, like we're based in America, like how are we going to be involved? And that's a real question that we're going to have to keep navigating over the next couple of years. But I think it was good to start to get that question out there and for people to be thinking about it.
Absolutely. And I think that recognizing that, yes, I think the entire plan, the goals, the direction all became stronger because of being able to pull in all of that feedback and do it fairly quickly and in a systemized way so that we could take that into the second day. What was it like knowing that I was there to help drive that and facilitate not only the conversations for the meetings, but really pulling all of that information together and presenting it to your group? What was that like to be able to participate? I know we talked a little bit about that before, but the participate rather than drive.
I think for me, it just meant I knew even if I was trying to be as unbiased as possible, I would be listening and hearing comments within the lens of my experience with the organization thus far. And knowing that you were receiving this information and compiling it and organizing it made me feel more confident that it was like a less biased hearing or reading of those things and a more neutral presentation of like, this is what people have been saying, which I think was just super helpful for us.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll support that, and to say it felt really good to know that there was that we weren't alone in this process, and that there was someone who was, you know, taking the copious notes and was going to go back and help us synthesize what was heard and said, because it was, you know, on the days of the retreat, it was a lot of information. And a lot of back and forth conversations. And so having you there to say like, okay, you know, like notebook full of notes, and I think this is where you're at now, was really good, because there were a couple points during the actual, you know, retreat days that even I was like, I don't think I can can follow where this is going. And that is a role that I try as board president. I try to keep up with like where the conversation's going so we can end our discussions with like this is what we kind of think we agree on and we can move forward on this. And so to know that you were there to help us with that, and then also, to take in the opinions of, do the same thing with the opinions of the committees and the thoughts, just to that, that information intake and condensing and thinking about that was really great to have.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. And I think that like recognizing when I was coming in, I knew that we had a couple of primary goals because your board is spread out all over the country. You don't get the opportunity to meet a lot. There was also some need for connection with one another, for that trust of communication. And one of the things that came out of the one-on-ones that I got to do was I do that so that I can get to know the organization through everyone's different perspectives and it be really authentic to that individual. But B, so that I can build some of that like trust with individuals because I am coming in and jumping into an important conversation new to the organization. And one of the things that came out of me doing that is realizing how much you all were actually already on the same page and had opinions that you were not necessarily feeling as comfortable to present, and allowing for me to say, hey, I'm seeing some similarities here, and you all, I think, are feeling more progressive about the direction, and also all feeling more afraid of that other people aren't feeling that way. So I got to be that conduit of information so that could open up. But I think that one of the other things that I saw happening too is that because we created this space for the connection with me, but then also the connection with one another, there was some relaxation that happened, relaxing into the conversation and the comfort and really, honestly, the bravery that it took, because I definitely noticed as our time continued that people were able to be more direct, more honest, more specific, as opposed to feeling like they had to couch or to sugarcoat or to, like you said earlier, kind of dance around issues. I mean, was that your experience as well in the room of noticing that shift into more direct and forward conversations?
Yeah, I would say, oh, go ahead, Elsa.
Oh, I was actually going to jump forward into our communications since the retreat. So if you have anything. Okay. So so I have noticed since this process, because we just had a board meeting last night, we have started an every other month cadence to like keep ourselves going. We are testing out consent agendas and a differently structured meeting to make sure that we focus on operational and strategic at every meeting. So these are like direct things that have come out. And I'm really excited about this because at our like first attempt last night of this new structure, with all of our new pieces in place, we had a difficult strategic conversation where I felt like, everyone in the room did comfortably say what their opinion was. There was some agreement. There was a lot of respectful pushback. And, I think we came to a conclusion that satisfied all parties, also with an interesting action item that none of us anticipated coming out of the meeting. So, I won't speak for what happened during our retreat, but I will speak for how this exercise has like already, proved very, very good for the organization moving forward, and how, we had that time to practice communicating to each other, and we're using that now going forward. So it was very exciting.
Oh, that makes my heart so happy to hear, because it's one thing to celebrate it working in the room when I'm there. That's already something that is delightful, but knowing that there's the reverb and that it is continuing to serve you and support you, and to know that you had a board meeting last night where you were able to apply that. Oh, I didn't even know that. That was a delightful surprise that I just got to hear. What were you going to share though, Molly?
So mine was more based on the actual retreat. One of
Sure.
the things in thinking about the role that you played in that day, I know at the end of the first day, we all kind of felt like, oh, like we're really in it. And I don't know if we made as much progress forward as we wanted to. Like people were sharing a lot, and I think you're right that it was more honest, more like clear feedback, but it didn't. Yeah, we ended that first day kind of feeling like not stuck, but just, I don't know, seems like the really professional, appropriate way to sum that up, which I know is not super helpful, but maybe is relatable to other people. But the exciting thing, the reason I share this, and why I know it's okay for me to share this in this format, is that following that, Cassandra, you then went back and, went through your notes and the recording, and like really were working on summarizing that, and were able to pull out all of these really key insights that people had shared, and were able to recognize like, oh, we actually did hit that goal, even though we did it in a different way than our initial timeline had articulated. And so the next day, you were able to send out this great summary to all of us of like, here is what has been said so far. And when I was reading through that, I was like, wow, we really like knocked it out of the park, which was such a funny feeling after the day before being like, oh gosh, did we do enough? Like we didn't really get far enough in our agenda. So I share that because I think you're right that our communication pattern, um, you know, improved as the conversation went on. But I guess this is more like for other people to not feel bad if you like end part of it in a feeling of like, oh, that didn't feel like we got to where we wanted to be. It turned out we actually had gotten to our goals. It just didn't feel that way. And it really helped to have that outside person who was then going to synthesize and go back through all the notes and pull out like, you really did, you made it here. Because I guess I wonder if you hadn't been there and weren't playing that role, whether we as a board would have recognized that we had made that progress. And if we didn't recognize it, I do not think we would be as clearly moving forward in the ways we are now.
Yeah, I think I can support that, Molly. And Cassandra, you had provided for us a great outline of here's our agenda for day one, here's all the things we're going to do. And I remember leaving that day feeling kind of like Molly had said, but also you look at the clean agenda and it's like, well, did we tick all those boxes? And, for people who like to tick boxes, it's kind of it is like a let down feeling almost, but then you being able to say like, no, you ticked all the boxes, but here are the creative ways in which you did. And like, like Molly said, having someone to tell you that sometimes it doesn't have to be written a certain way on the paper. Like it happens. And having someone to help show us that and like take us down that process, because I think, when you have like a big audacious goal that you want to achieve, and it is multifactorial, and that you as an organization spin your wheels, and you have one person to help accomplish all this, you come in with like, ugh, and I've lost my train of thought, but just having someone to help us connect those dots and to get us to, you actually are doing what you aren't sure that you're doing, like you're actually doing it. It feels very good.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I obviously I've shared this at least with Molly. I think I shared it with both of you because I think I started day 2 talking about that feeling, that heaviness that everybody kind of left with on that first day, right? The feeling. And I had shared transparently that I was feeling that, like, as we were closing that call, I thought, oh wow, looking at the agenda on the page, woo, we did not cover the ground we thought we were going to. And I had always been managing expectations with Molly about, like, there's a lot that we're trying to accomplish. We're doing these meetings in less time than I typically do them. And so I am figuring out the ways that's one of those customization pieces that we ended up doing, saying, like, how do we streamline the process that I usually go through into the amount of time that the board would be able to have. But I think that, like, it just demonstrates sort of my background in teaching has served me well, bringing that into this, like, facilitation and strategic planning. And what I mean by that is that I always, and teaching teachers to build curriculum, is like, you don't create a giant lesson or a really detailed lesson plan because you expect it to go exactly the way that you have it on the page, right? It is your roadmap about how and where you want to go, and your guidepost, right? But also, you want to know your roadmap so well that when you get off track, you can recalibrate much more quickly. And so that's what I have fun doing in the room too, is I recognized as the time was ticking down, the clock was ticking down, that I needed to get to some of those pieces, and we weren't going to get to them in the ways that I had planned. And so I was able to pull from my toolbox and be like, all right, kind of pivoting to new ways to get to some of those pieces more quickly, which I was so excited that we were able to. Some of it I recognized in the room, and I was speaking to that as we were wrapping up, and I was like, I know that I can feel this kind of heaviness, know that you did really well. But like I said, in full transparency, there was part of me going, oh no, as well. And when I got to sit down and synthesize, I was just delighted about the progress that you all were able to make, and really, you all should be proud of, because you rose to that occasion and all showed up ready to work. And I think part of that was the way that we primed and got ready to be in the room, the intentional planning. I think that a lot of times people will jump into those meetings without a lot of intentional forethought and planning and sort of thinking about those questions ahead of time. But because we were able to get those wheels turning beforehand, we were able to get a lot more ground covered in the room, I think. But so I know that we were able to talk about how we brought that information back to the committees, got their feedback, came back for day 2. Tell me a little bit about kind of that shift into day 2 then. What were you excited about that came out of that we haven't touched on, or that we want to unpack further about well, before you answer that question, just to give a little context too for those that are listening in, our agenda, or our goal for the retreat, was to make sure that Croso had a clearly stated specific vision for 5 years, a 5-year goal list, as well as a 1-year goal list, and really making sure that all of that was clearly mapped out and thought through in terms of how does it all fit together. So that was our big, hairy, audacious goal, knowing also that there was this big desire to shift into having Ugandan operations, which is very different than what they've ever done before. So with that in mind, talk to us a little bit about, like, what day 2 was like for you.
Yeah, I'll just say, I wish day 2 could have been longer, honestly. Because that was, when you did reassure us that, yes, we had actually gotten further than we thought we did on day 1. But then we got into, okay, like, again, for those who are prone to execution, like, here's the spreadsheet, here's how you write a goal, here's all the different things that will connect to make that happen. And that was, it was, a good learning experience. It was a new exercise for a lot of people. And it was something I really enjoyed getting to get in the weeds a little bit. it was something that I wish we could have had more time to do together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that recognizing that these kinds of conversations require being able to look at the big picture, be zoomed out, as well as be able to zoom in. And some people, their happy place is one place or the other. Some people really like the big vision. They're the visionaries, they're the dreamers. So it's not as scary or hard to be in the big vision. And then there are people who the big vision, without all of the details, without the specificity, is scary, and they're more comfortable zoomed in and seeing it all mapped out. And I think that your board is made up of a blend of those of both types of people, which I think is healthy, but it also means that at different points throughout the process, we're going to be in each other's different comfort zones, right? And Molly, I know that you had gone through a process with me when I had done a challenge outside of working with Croso, where we had done some of that like goal setting and specificity and goal planning. How was going through that and then with me in that setting, and then coming in and knowing that I was going to go through a similar process with Croso? What was that like for you, and how has that served Croso since we had our board retreat? And I'm genuinely interested. I'm excited because, like you said, Elsa, we didn't have as much time to drill down as far in our group. So I'm curious to hear, how is that goal, like the specificity and planning of the goals, gone since our retreat together?
Yeah. So to go back to like the beginning, so I had that experience with you and found it to be really helpful to like to drill down. I feel like I have moments of being a big vision person and moments of getting caught in the weeds. And so sometimes it's helpful for me to have the structure to say, you need to do both, and here is like the place to do it. So I found that personally helpful. And I knew that, like you said, our board is a really lovely blend of both of those, which I think really does serve our organization really well. So I found it really helpful when we actually were doing it together, so that people could be just sort of shouting out the different pieces that they could think of that were part of this goal. And then you helped to put it in the right places. So to say like, that is a milestone for us. And so that's part of our bigger picture things, and say like, yep, that's a little detail. We're going to put that as an activity, and that's going to be something that helps us reach it, but fits in this column. And I think what's really nice about the activity is it recognizes the importance of all of those pieces, but really recognizes that they're all important, not just the big pieces and not just the little pieces. And so I think it was really helpful for everyone involved to see that their input mattered, but also that there was all this other input coming in that needed to be there too. Just sort of re-emphasize the importance of that collaborative process. Since we met, I have like a mixed report for you.
Okay.
I feel like I'm like turning in like a half homework assignment right now. So we have put all of the 1-year goals into a spreadsheet, and they have not fully been transferred to the owners of each of those goals yet. So our plan is that the owners of each of those goals will then be able to take, so we put everything in the spreadsheet that came from our document. So as an end product, Cassandra put together a document that has all our 5-year goals and all our 1-year goals. And there's the summary statement of like what it is and how we'll know when we've achieved it. So some like measurable pieces of that. And then there's also some of the like brainstormed, this is what we're going to do to get there. But that's incomplete, right? Because that was just based on our conversation. So we've put that all into spreadsheets. And now I'm excited that the next piece is that each of the goal owners will get that and get to look at that more fully and start filling in the gaps, because some of them have a lot of milestones and no activities, and some of them have a lot of activities and no milestones. So there's space for for additional ideas to be put in, but I think having the framework is super helpful. So, and I think one thing that we're looking to sort of add to that, we've adjusted the framework you provided to us to make it more to make it a better fit for us, which I feel very comfortable doing because you've been so encouraging to adapt things to make them work for Croso. And one of the pieces that we're adding is to make sure we have clear ownership of each of the activity lines so that we can clearly keep track of that and continue to monitor our progress on that. So,
I love to hear that you have it at the activity level too. I know that like one of the things we worked on together was the idea that each goal needs to have an owner. And in the case of Croso, because it is committee based, making it a committee owner as opposed to an individual owner. But a lot of times in organizations, it works best to have an individual owner. So I'm glad to hear that that's serving you well to attach that to the smaller pieces, because I think that that's the right direction. So that makes me excited to hear. Well, what do you feel like really is possible for Croso now that you've been able to go through this experience and get these kind of results?
I mean, I'm confident that we won't have another year where we get to the end of the year and we're like, oh no, we didn't do that thing we said we were going to do. Either we'll meet the goal, or if we don't, we'll know where we're at in the process. And I'm excited for, the increased communication and increased visibility and transparency that that this structure offers our organization.
I love that. Molly, did you have anything?
No, she's right. I agree.
I love it. Well, I know that you talked about some of the benefits that you got both during the process and since then, but what do you feel like, is there any outcome or result that surprised you or that was unexpected that you're feeling especially grateful for or excited about?
I think the one for me, and this happened really early on, was just that sense of I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I wasn't fully aware of all of the dancing around that might have been happening in board members' minds around my role with Croso and what that meant around future staffing conversations. And so I'm super great. I didn't know, because I didn't know that going in. I was surprised that was one of the outcomes that happened, again, really early on in working with you. But I think it's made other people feel more comfortable to say things that might, in their minds, negatively affect my career path. In my mind, it is not negative, which is helpful that they now know that. But I think it also has made me feel more comfortable to say, as we're doing this, we need to be mindful every step of the way of like, how are we preparing to pass off this information to other staff members? Because we are not planning that I will be the person doing this forever and ever. And so it's just really helpful, sort of on an organizational level, that we're being more mindful of like, how do we make sure information is accessible on all of these issues, and what are the systems we're putting in place to do that, which I think is super helpful for us, super healthy for us as an organization.
I love that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I'm feeling a bit more that there is a sense of permission, both permission for Molly to go ahead and do what she needs to do operationally to get things done, but also permission, from board and committee members to be creative and to, speak their creativity more broadly and go forth. So I'm pretty excited about that.
I love that. And how do you feel like those pieces that you both spoke to are going to contribute to the continued like success and direction of Croso?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that it opens up different ways of thinking, and I hope that the permission to have more of a change mindset and to be more open about that. I hope that continues. I anticipate it continuing. I am nervous for the moment when operationally things slow down or we stumble or we lose a little bit of momentum. But having this practice, I think that and now having a vision set for the future, I think will be easier for us to recover from any future stumbles.
Yeah, I think to your point about feeling we have the permission to move forward on things, I definitely feel that more clearly. And even with the very clear example of us looking to hire someone in Uganda, the conversations that I've had and the actions I've been able to take to move that item forward, even in the last month and a half, have been I've hit stumbling blocks already and already felt like it was okay for me to pivot without needing the full permission from the board to recognize that difference, because I know I'm going in the direction we want to be going, even if the tasks look different. And so that feels really nice and super productive. It just feels like, okay, we're not spinning our wheels, because even though it doesn't look the way we thought it was going to, we're making progress in the right ways. And that's super exciting.
I love that, knowing because you have a clear idea of the direction you're going, it just makes decision making quicker and you're able to be more confident and relaxed in it because yes, it's not going the way that maybe the activities didn't get us to the exact spot, but I know where I'm headed. So I love that. And I think one of the things that came out of the board retreat too is recognizing that you are all such a values-based organization that very much aligns with my values as well, which made it exciting to be a part of supporting you all, but also recognizing that this decision to move operations to Uganda was a values-based decision. And yet I think that was one of the pieces that had been being left out of the conversation that I think was making some people, creating some of that discomfort or that fear or uncertainty about how are people feeling. And so when we were able to not only define what do we want to do, where are we going, but the why, and being able to bring the why to the forefront, so that not only do we know where we're going, but we have the motivation behind it. I think that also increased the clarity, the specificity, and the confidence that you all had. And I wondered if that was a feeling that you both shared as well.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that.
Awesome. Well, I'm wondering too, I know that at the very beginning of the conversation, you said, honestly, this was not something we budgeted for, but it's something that we had to figure out. Can you talk? I think that's pretty common in businesses and organizations, that we run into something that we know is something that we could benefit from an organization or we really need, but that we are, that we frankly didn't put a line item in for. So how did you all work through that? And how did you end up getting to a place that you decided to make the funding happen, make the money work in order to get the support you needed? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. This fits into our larger conversation, right? As an organization, we have a really healthy reserve, which is not something that all nonprofits can say, but it makes us even better poised for this growth. And I think we as the executive committee really have recognized that. But traditionally, we sort of operated out of a scarcity mindset. And that's something that I think we are actively trying to transition away from a scarcity mindset and recognize that we have the resources and the capability to use our resources to better serve our organization. And if there are opportunities like this, where it would be using some of our reserves to invest in our organization so that we are moving our mission forward, that is an absolutely appropriate use of our reserves. So I think for us, it was, we didn't put it in the budget, but we have the money. We just need to say that it's okay for us to use this money. And when we recognized how it fits with how it will support our ability to operate moving moving forward, it was a no-brainer of like, yes, absolutely, this is something we should be investing in.
Yeah, I think that it's really common, I think, for, again, organizations to realize they have a need that they didn't necessarily put in a line item. And I think individuals, we do that too. Sometimes we are, and I think it's a lovely place that Croso does have such strong reserves and can pull from that. And I think that sometimes organizations also have that and are just like blind, like there's kind of blinders up, right? Other times, maybe the resources aren't so easily recognizable, but recognizing that when something is important, we're able to get creative, and that there are often opportunities to make things happen. And so I'm excited that you all were able to like shift mindset as well as just realize that you had resources to support the organization. So I know that we have been going on for a while, so I do want us to wrap up. But my I think final question for you is, what would you say to somebody who is maybe on the kind of verge, so to speak, of considering bringing somebody in to help their organization, or to help with facilitation or with strategic planning, and are really trying to wrestle through that? What would be your advice to somebody who is going through that same decision process that you all did?
Stop wrestling. It's worth it. It's totally worth it. So that's the short answer. But I mean, the longer answer is that it is worth it. I think if you and your organization, if you find yourself in any of the places that we are at in Croso, if you find yourself in other places, and if you know that your team is open to having the conversations and open to thinking in this new and different way, then it's very much worth it, right? If you can, if you can sense there's deep resistance. But I think if you feel as if you are on the precipice, as we certainly did, then just like take the plunge and trust the process. And it's worth it.
Love it.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I would add just as maybe more specifically from the executive director point of view, that it has made so much of a difference for me in my day-to-day, not just in the permission piece that we were just speaking to, of like feeling like I have the ability to move things forward because the board has clearly stated what direction we're going, and so I know I'm going in that direction. But even excuse me, even on just like a day-to-day basis, in my excitement and enthusiasm for the work, it renewed it by 150%, because it was so helpful to know that like the board was invested in this and on the same page as me, and not necessarily the same page as me, but that we were all on the same page together, right? Like I needed to shift some of my thinking to align with the board, and that's good. And so that was part of this process too. But as I have been interacting with some of our donors, I've been able to say like, oh, I can't wait to sit down with you and talk about this strategic plan, because we now have like real documents that were created for this, which I'll be honest, we've never had real documents. It's always been like, oh, we have notes in this spreadsheet that we took while we were in this meeting. So if that resonates with other people, it's really nice to have real documents. And I don't know that there are enough words for me to use to say like, absolutely do this.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I am delighted to hear that it has been such a support to you all. I have been honored to be a part of your process, and just like delighted in cheering you all on, because I know that the work that you do is so valuable and making a difference in Uganda and really in the world. You're able to be setting examples for other organizations. I know that that was something that I know that the board was talking about too through the process, was like, how are we connecting to other to our community, to other organizations? And I think that your commitment to the work and now your renewed energy, and you're all rowing in the same direction or on the same page, as you said. I'm just excited to check in soon and see how everything is going, and also celebrate. And Elsa and I were talking about it before we all went live, but celebrating that you all just had your annual Croso Gives. Is that the right name? Did I get it right?
Croso Commits.
Oh, commits. Oh my goodness. Thank you for correcting me. Croso Commits. I like the alliteration, but you just had your Croso Commits fundraiser, and you were able to raise more funds than you ever have before. And were able to hit those goals. And then you have a matching partner too, right? So tell, like, just to send us off on a celebration, do you want to just like share about the success of your fundraiser last week?
Sure. Yeah, we have an annual online day of giving called Croso Commits, and our goal this year was 25,000. Just to give like a scope, when we started this 4 years ago, our initial goal I think was like $3,000 for the day. So we've grown significantly over the last couple of years, but each year we've kind of created this goal that feels a little bit of a stretch, and each year we've been able to achieve it. And yes, this year we did have a matching donor, so in one day we were able to raise a little over $50,000, which is incredible, and such a testament to all of the volunteers and board members that helped fundraise and spread the word about the amazing work of our scholars.
I love it. And that's going to be so supportive as you're doing this shift and following your values to create this big change of being Ugandan based. And so I'm just so delighted and honored that I got to spend time with you all. And thank you for spending time chatting about what the process was like. And I know that we have our weekends to get into, but I appreciate you spending part of your Friday night with me, and I appreciate you all. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Cassandra.
Thank you. This was fun. Bye-bye.